There's something almost mythical about certain shiny Pokémon, creatures whose alternate colorations exist at the intersection of chance, circumstance, and history itself. These are not simply rare because of probability alone, but because time has sealed away their availability, leaving only whispers of opportunities that closed decades ago. Tonight, we drift through the stories of these impossibly scarce variants, exploring how specific moments in gaming history created treasures that can never be replicated. The rarest shinies remind us that sometimes rarity isn't about luck at all, and the best place to start is where a small pink mythical first appeared on a distant island, where the concept of impossible odds first took shape in ways the developers never quite intended. Before you settle in, maybe tap subscribe for more calm videos, and share where in the world you're watching from tonight. In the world of shiny hunting, most trainers understand the basic mathematics of probability. Standard shiny odds sit at 1 in 8,192 in older generations, shifting to 1 in 4,096 in modern titles. These numbers represent the foundation of what makes encountering an alternate coloration feel special, a genuine surprise amid countless normal encounters. The odds themselves create a sense of achievement, transforming a simple wild battle into something memorable, something worth sharing with friends and communities who understand the dedication required. But these standard probabilities only tell part of the story, because beneath the surface of random number generation lies a deeper truth about what makes certain shinies transcend simple rarity. The truly exceptional shiny Pokémon exist in a different category entirely. Their scarcity emerges not from endless soft resets or hours spent in tall grass, but from historical circumstances that Game Freak created, sometimes intentionally and sometimes by accident. These are creatures locked behind event distributions that occurred only once, items that were never released outside specific countries, or encounters programmed into games with mechanics so difficult to manipulate that success bordered on impossibility. When we talk about the rarest shinies, we're discussing Pokémon whose value comes from irreversible decisions made by developers years or decades ago, choices that transformed what should have been standard mythical encounters into treasures accessible only to those who happen to be in the right place at the right time. This distinction between statistical rarity and historical rarity creates fascinating layers within the collecting community. A player could theoretically hunt for a shiny starter indefinitely, resetting their game thousands of times until a probability finally favors them. That hunt, while demanding patience and determination, remains mathematically achievable for anyone with enough time. But no amount of dedication can grant access to an event that concluded 15 years ago or retrieve an item that was distributed exclusively at a single gaming convention in Tokyo. Historical rarity imposes absolute boundaries, creating a permanent ceiling on how many legitimate specimens can ever exist, and that fundamental difference shapes how collectors view these creatures. The concept of shiny Pokémon itself originated in Generation 2 with gold, silver, and crystal. Game Freak introduced the feature as a way to make encounters feel more varied and special, giving players something to hunt beyond simply completing the Pokédex. The visual indicator was subtle in those in early games, a brief sparkle animation and slightly different coloration that many players initially mistook for graphical glitches. But as the community grew and information spread through the internet forums, shiny hunting evolved from accidental discoveries into intentional pursuits, with dedicated trainers developing strategies to maximize their chances of finding these rare variants. What made Generation 2's shiny system particularly interesting was its connection to a Pokémon's individual values, the hidden stats that determined its strength. Shininess wasn't purely random, but tied to specific IV combinations, meaning that shiny Pokemon from this generation often had particular stat distributions. This quirk created an additional layer of rarity for competitive players who wanted both optimal stats and alternate coloration, a combination that was mathematically even less probable than encountering a shiny under normal circumstances. The system would change in later generations, but this early implementation established shinies as something more than cosmetic variants, embedding them into the game's underlying mechanics in ways that would influence collecting culture for decades. As generations progressed, Game Freak introduced methods to improve shiny odds, making the hunt more accessible while still maintaining that core sense of rarity. The Masuda method in Generation 4 allowed players to breed Pokemon from different language games, slightly increasing shiny probability. Chain fishing in Generation 6 created the opportunities to stack encounters and improve odds gradually. The Shiny Charm, an item rewarded for completing the Pokédex, provided a permanent boost to encounter rates across all hunting methods. Each of these additions democratized shiny hunting to some degree, giving dedicated players tools to pursue specific targets more efficiently than pure random encounters would allow. And before you drift off, maybe tap subscribe for more gentle videos, and let me know where you're listening from tonight. But these quality of life improvements also created a sharper contrast with the truly rare shinies, the ones that couldn't be hunted through modern methods, because they were locked behind circumstances that had already passed. As shiny hunting became more accessible and communities developed elaborate strategies for optimizing encounters, the mythical creatures distributed through limited events or trapped behind unreleased items grew even more prestigious by comparison. They represented a form of rarity that couldn't be overcome through patience or technique, only through having participated in specific moments of Pokemon history that would never repeat. Among these historically rare creatures, Shiny Mew stands as perhaps the most iconic example. Mew itself has always occupied a special place in Pokemon mythology, the original mythical creature discovered hiding in the Code of Red and Blue, a secret 151st entry that sparked countless schoolyard rumors and eventually became a cornerstone of the franchise's legendary appeal. But while Mew distributions occurred periodically throughout the series' history, allowing players across different regions to eventually summon one through various events, the shiny variant exists under far more restrictive circumstances that make it one of the rarest legitimate Pokemon ever obtainable. The story of Shiny Mew's rarity centers primarily on Pokemon Emerald and an item called the Old Sea Map. Unlike most mythical Pokemon distributed directly through Mystery Gift or in-store events, Emerald's Mew was designed to be encountered in-game through an actual explorable location. Faraway Island exists within the game's data, a mysterious place featuring tall grass and a strange maze-like layout where Mew appears as a visible sprite that moves away from the player as they approach. This design created a unique encounter experience, something more interactive and memorable than simply receiving a mythical through a wireless transfer, and it positioned Mew as something players could genuinely hunt within the game world itself. But accessing Faraway Island required the Old Sea Map, an event-exclusive item that was only distributed at a single Japanese event in 2005. This item was never released internationally, never redistributed through later events, and never made available through any official means beyond that original limited distribution. The decision to restrict it so severely meant that the vast majority of Emerald players, even those actively following Pokemon news and attending events in their own countries, had no legitimate way to access Faraway Island. The Old Sea Map became instantly rare the moment its distribution ended, and as years passed without any re-release, its status solidified into something approaching impossibility. For the small number of Japanese players who did attend the event and obtained the old sea map, the journey to Mew still required navigating Faraway Island's puzzle-like layout and successfully reaching the encounter. Once the battle began, Mew could be caught like any other static legendary, using Ultra Balls and status conditions to improve capture chances. This encounter could be soft reset, meaning players could restart their game and re-trigger the battle if they wanted to hunt for specific stats or natures. And critically, because this was an in-game encounter rather than a guaranteed event distribution, it was subject to shiny odds, making Shiny Mew theoretically obtainable to anyone with the patience to hunt it. But the odds themselves created an almost insurmountable barrier. In Pokemon Emerald, shiny probability sits at 1 in 8,192, the standard rate for Generation 3. With no shiny charm to boost chances and no way to chain encounters or breed for better odds, hunting Shiny Mew meant performing thousands of soft resets at full probability. Each reset required turning off the Game Boy Advance, restarting the game, loading the save file, and navigating back to Faraway Island to trigger the encounter again. This process could take several minutes per attempt, transforming what was already a 1 in 8,000 chance into a hunt that could easily consume hundreds of hours even under ideal circumstances. What made the hunt even more challenging was Pokemon Emerald's broken random number generation. Unlike Ruby and Sapphire, which use a proper RNG seed that advances naturally, Emerald's RNG implementation contains a flaw that causes it to generate the same initial seed on every soft reset. This means that without manipulating the timing of the game's startup very precisely, players could be hitting the same non-shiny frames repeatedly, never actually cycling through the full range of possible outcomes. For years, many players attempting to shiny hunt an Emerald didn't understand this quirk, assuming they were simply experiencing bad luck, when in reality, the game's mechanics were preventing them from ever accessing shiny frames naturally. The community eventually discovered methods to manipulate Emerald's RNG through careful timing techniques. By counting frames from the moment the game boots up and hitting the encounter at precise intervals, skilled hunters could cycle through different RNG states and eventually hit shiny-capable frames. But this requires external timing tools, deep knowledge of the game's internal mechanics, and extremely precise execution. Even with these techniques, hunting Shiny Mew in Emerald remains one of the most technically demanding shiny hunts in the entire franchise, combining limited historical access with genuinely punishing mechanical requirements. As we drift a little deeper tonight, it's worth considering just how few legitimate Shiny Mew from Emerald exist. The old sea map was distributed only in Japan for a brief window, meaning the pool of potential hunters was already restricted to a small geographic region. Of those who obtained the item, only a fraction would have had the knowledge, patience, and technical skill to successfully manipulate Emerald's RNG and complete the hunt. And even among those dedicated enough to try, many likely gave up after hundreds or thousands of resets, unaware that the game's mechanics were working against them. The result is a creature whose legitimate existence can likely be counted in the dozens at most, scattered across a community of millions of players worldwide. The visual appearance of Shiny Mew adds another layer to its mystique. While many shinies feature dramatic color changes that completely transform a Pokemon's appearance, Shiny Mew's shift is more subtle, but no less striking. Its standard soft pink coloration becomes a pale, almost ethereal blue, creating an appearance that feels dreamlike and otherworldly. This gentle color palette matches Mew's playful, mysterious nature perfectly, avoiding the sometimes garish color swaps that make certain shinies less desirable. The blue tone feels intentional and elegant, reinforcing why Shiny Mew is sought not just for its rarity, but for its genuine aesthetic appeal. In recent years, official Pokemon distributions have occasionally offered Shiny Mew through other methods, most notably through Pokemon Go events and certain limited distributions tied to newer games. These distributions are significantly more accessible than the Emerald Hunt, often guaranteed to be shiny and available to players across multiple regions through more modern distribution systems. While these event Mew are certainly rare in their own right, collectors still distinguish between them and the Emerald variant. The Emerald Shiny Mew represents something different, a hunt that required not just access to a time-limited event, but genuine technical skill and extraordinary patience. It exists as a monument to a specific era of Pokemon, when obtaining certain creatures demanded levels of dedication that modern quality of life improvements have largely eliminated. Another mythical creature, trapped in similar circumstances, is Darkrai, the nightmare Pokemon introduced in Generation 4. Darkrai's lore positions it as a creature of shadows and bad dreams, a being whose very presence causes those nearby to experience terrible nightmares. This dark reputation made it a popular target among collectors who appreciated both its competitive viability and its atmospheric design. But like Mew before it, Darkrai's most elusive form exists behind event restrictions that transformed what should have been a straightforward mythical distribution into one of the franchise's most notorious rarities. In Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, Darkrai was designed to be encountered on New Moon Island, a location accessible only through the member card item. This item was intended to be distributed through Nintendo Wi-Fi connection events, allowing players to receive it wirelessly and then travel to New Moon Island to encounter Darkrai in battle. The encounter itself was similar to other roaming legendaries, a single static battle that could be soft reset and hunted like any standard legendary Pokemon. And because it was an in-game encounter rather than a guaranteed distribution, it was subject to normal shiny odds, theoretically allowing players to hunt for shiny Darkrai if they were willing to invest the time. But here the situation becomes complicated. The member card was distributed in certain regions during specific time windows, primarily in 2009 and 2010. Players in North America, Europe, and Japan all had opportunities to receive the item through official events, meaning that unlike the old C map for Mew, the member card did reach an international audience. However, these distributions were temporary, tied to Nintendo's Wi-Fi connection service, which has since been shut down. Once the distribution windows ended, no new member cards could be obtained, and when Nintendo discontinued the Wi-Fi service entirely in 2014, even players who had the items stored on their cartridges lost access to certain online features. The key factor that elevates Shiny Darkrai to extreme rarity is what happened after these initial distributions. In later generations, Game Freak began distributing Darkrai directly through mystery gift events, bypassing New Moon Island entirely and simply giving players a Darkrai with preset stats. These later distributions made Darkrai more accessible, but they also came with a catch. Event-distributed Darkrai from Generation 5 onward were almost always shiny locked, meaning they could not appear in shiny form under any circumstances. This meant that the only way to obtain a legitimate shiny Darkrai was to have received the member card during its original distribution window and successfully hunted it on New Moon Island at full odds. Much like the Emerald Mew situation, this created a very narrow window of opportunity. Players needed to have owned Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum during the member card's distribution period, actually received the item through one of the time-limited events, and then dedicated themselves to a full odds shiny hunt before the concept became impossible through later game releases. The hunt itself was no easy task, as Generation 4's 1 in 8,192 odds still applied, and soft resetting the encounter could take several minutes per attempt, depending on the player's setup and how quickly they could navigate through the dialogue and battle initiation. What makes Shiny Darkray's story particularly interesting is how it represents a shift in Game Freak's approach to mythical Pokemon. In Generation 3, with creatures like Mew, the limitation came primarily from never releasing the required items. But with Darkrai, the item was released internationally, yet the shiny variant still became rare because later distributions removed the ability to hunt it legitimately. This created a strange situation where players who missed the original window had access to Darkrai itself, but no path to its shiny form. The gap between accessibility and impossibility narrowed, yet somehow the rarest variant became even more exclusive because official channels explicitly prevented it from appearing in later events. Collectors who own legitimate shiny Darkrai from the original member card encounter possess something that can never be replicated through current official means. Even if Game Freak decided to re-release the member card in a hypothetical future event, the Pokemon community's knowledge has advanced to the point where such a distribution would be scrutinized intensely. Legitimate shiny Darkrai from Generation 4 would carry specific origin markers, encounter location data, and other metadata that distinguish them from any potential future distributions. This creates a fascinating layer of provenance, where the historical context of when and how a Pokemon was obtained becomes as important as the creature itself. The visual transformation of shiny Darkrai fits its dark, nightmarish theme perfectly. While its standard form features deep blacks and dark blues with red accents, the shiny variant shifts these colors to deep purples and dark magentas, creating an appearance that feels even more otherworldly and unsettling. The color scheme maintains Darkray's ominous aesthetic while making it instantly distinguishable from the normal variant. For collectors who appreciate both competitive viability and visual design, Shiny Darkrai represents an ideal combination, a creature that looks stunning and performs well in battle, wrapped in layers of historical rarity that elevate it beyond simple aesthetic preference. Shaymin, the Gratitude Pokemon, presents yet another variation on this theme of mythical creatures trapped behind event restrictions. Introduced in the same generation as Darkrai, Shaymin exists in two forms, its standard land form and its more aggressive-looking sky form. Both forms have their own shiny variants, and both are subject to the same historical restrictions that make them extraordinarily rare. Shaymin's story differs slightly from Darkrai's, but it arrives at a similar conclusion, a creature whose shiny variant exists only for those who participated in specific moments of Pokemon history that closed permanently years ago. Access to Shaymin in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum required Oak's Letter, another event-exclusive item that was never released in most regions. Unlike the member card for Darkrai, which did receive them international distributions, Oak's Letter was far more restricted. It was distributed primarily in Japan through certain events, with very limited availability in other regions. Some players in North America and Europe did eventually gain access through specific promotional events, but these were far less widespread than the Darkrai distribution. This immediately placed Shaymin in an even more exclusive category, a mythical that many Western players simply had no legitimate way to obtain during the Generation 4 era. For players who did receive Oak's Letter, the item allowed them to access the Flower Paradise, a special location where Shaymin appears as a static encounter. This encounter functioned identically to other legendary battles, meaning it could be soft reset and hunted for shiny variants at the standard 1 in 8,192 odds. Like Darkrai, Shaymin became shiny locked in later event distributions, meaning that the only legitimate path to shiny Shaymin was through the original Oak's letter encounter in Generation 4. And just like Darkrai, this created a very narrow historical window where the shiny variant was obtainable. There's a quiet comfort in remembering moments like these, instances where game developers created paths to special Pokémon but surrounded them with enough restrictions to make success feel genuinely meaningful. The design philosophy behind these event-locked mythicals reflected an era when rarity was still closely guarded, when not every player was expected to obtain every Pokémon, and when certain creatures were meant to remain legendary in more than just name. Oak's letter and the member card represent this philosophy, items that granted access to encounters rather than guaranteeing the Pokémon themselves, preserving the hunting experience, even for creatures that most players would never see. Shaymin's shiny forms carry distinct visual identities that make them highly desirable beyond their rarity. Shiny Shaymin in land form shifts from soft greens and whites to brighter, more vibrant greens, with pink accents where the flowers on its back bloom in different colors. The change is gentle but noticeable, maintaining Shaymin's cute, approachable aesthetic while making it stand out. Shiny Sky form. Shaymin undergoes a more dramatic transformation, with its sleek, aerodynamic body shifting to white and its green markings becoming more cyan-tinted. Both forms are visually appealing in ways that make collectors value them for aesthetic reasons as much as for their historical rarity. Arceus occupies a unique position in this discussion of rare shinies, not just because of its extreme rarity, but because of its lore significance as the creator deity of the Pokémon universe. Arceus is described in mythology as the Pokémon that emerged from an egg in nothingness and created the world itself, shaping time, space, and antimatter through its power. This positioning at the top of the Pokémon cosmology makes any Arceus special, but the shiny variant carries additional weight due to how Game Freak has handled its distribution throughout the series. In Generation 4, Arceus was technically programmed to be encountered in-game through an event item called the Azure Flute. This item would have allowed players to access the Hall of Origin, a special location atop Mount Coronet, where Arceus appears for battle. Like in other mythical encounters in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, this would have been a soft resettable encounter subject to normal shiny odds. But critically, the Azure Flute was never officially distributed. Game Freak designed the item, programmed the encounter, and then decided not to release it, citing concerns that the complex method of activating the Hall of Origin would be too confusing for younger players. This decision had massive implications for shiny Arceus's rarity. Because the Azure Flute was never distributed, no legitimate in-game encounter with Arceus ever occurred in Generation 4. Players who wanted Arceus had to wait for direct distributions, which Game Freak eventually provided through various event giveaways. These distributed Arceus were guaranteed to not be shiny, as all event mythicals in this era were shiny locked. This created an impossible situation where shiny Arceus technically existed in the game's code and could theoretically be encountered if someone had the Azure Flute. But because the item was never released, no legitimate shiny Arceus from Generation 4 exists. For years, the only way to obtain any shiny Arceus was through distributions in later generations, and even those were incredibly rare. Game Freak has been extremely conservative about distributing shiny mythicals, treating them as special occasions worthy of major promotional events. Shiny Arceus distributions have occurred, but they've been tied to specific movie promotions in Japan or other highly limited events, making them accessible only to small subsets of players in specific regions during brief windows. Each distribution came with preset stats, ribbons, and other identifiers that make legitimate event Arceus instantly recognizable and extremely valuable. The situation changed somewhat with the release of Pokemon Legends Arceus, a game that reimagined the Sinnoh region's history and allowed players to encounter Arceus through completing the game's main story. But even this encounter was shiny locked, meaning that despite the game being centered around Arceus thematically, players still could not obtain a shiny variant through legitimate gameplay. This consistent pattern of shiny locking across generations has made shiny Arceus one of the most closely guarded alternate colorations in the franchise, a Pokemon that Game Freak has repeatedly decided should not be easily accessible in its shiny form. Collectors who possess legitimate shiny Arceus from any source are holding on to something extraordinarily rare. Because the Azure Flute was never released, every legitimate shiny Arceus must come from an official event distribution, and those distributions are so limited that even active collectors who attend events regularly may have missed every opportunity. The combination of Arceus's lore significance, its position as the supreme deity of the Pokemon world, and Game Freak's deliberate choice to restrict its shiny form has created a creature that exists at the absolute peak of rarity among mythical Pokemon. Visually, shiny Arceus transforms in a way that feels appropriately divine. Its standard form features a white body with golden accents and a glowing wheel that shifts colors based on the type it holds. The shiny variant changes these golden accents to bright yellows and the body to a slight cream tone, creating a warmer, more radiant appearance. The change is subtle but elegant, maintaining Arceus's godlike aesthetic while giving it a distinct identity that collectors immediately recognize. For a Pokemon meant to represent creation itself, even its shiny form feels carefully considered and thematically appropriate. As we move deeper into this exploration, it's worth considering how these historically rare shinies reflect broader changes in how Game Freak approaches mythical Pokemon distribution. In Generations 3 and 4, mythical Pokemon were often designed with in-game encounters that theoretically allowed for hunting, even if the items required to access those encounters were distributed restrictively or not at all. This created situations where shiny variants existed in the code and could be obtained with the right circumstances, preserving at least the theoretical possibility of hunting even for creatures most players would never access. Beginning in Generation 5 and continuing through later generations, Game Freak shifted more toward direct distributions that bypassed in-game encounters entirely. Mythical Pokemon were increasingly given away as preset event gifts with fixed stats, ribbons, and shiny status. This approach had advantages in terms of accessibility, as players no longer needed to track down rare event items or worry about whether their region would receive distributions. But it also meant that hunting shiny mythicals became increasingly impossible, as events specifically prevented the creatures from appearing in alternate colorations, unless Game Freak explicitly chose to distribute a shiny variant. This shift fundamentally changed what it means for a mythical shiny to be rare. In the Generation 3 and 4 era, rarity came from the combination of limited item access and full odds hunting. In later generations, rarity comes almost exclusively from limited distributions, as hunting is simply not an option. The result is that modern rare shinies like Shiny Poipole or Shiny Zeraora exist not because they're hard to hunt, but because Game Freak chose to distribute them in small quantities for brief periods. The source of rarity has moved from player effort combined with historical access to purely historical access alone. Poipole represents this modern approach to rare shinies perfectly. Introduced in Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon as an Ultra Beast, Poipole is a creature from another dimension that enters the Pokemon world through ultra wormholes. In the game's story, players receive a Poipole as a gift after completing certain objectives, but this gift Poipole is shiny locked, meaning it cannot appear in alternate coloration under any circumstances. This immediately placed Shiny Poipole in the category of event-exclusive creatures, Pokemon that can only be obtained through official distributions rather than in-game hunting. The Shiny Poipole distribution occurred primarily in 2018 when Game Freak released codes through participating retailers in North America and Europe. Players who obtained these codes could redeem them in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon to receive a guaranteed Shiny Poipole. Unlike the mythical hunts of earlier generations, there was no soft resetting involved, no odds to overcome, and no technical knowledge required. Every player who successfully redeemed a code received the shiny variant, making the determining factor of rarity not probability, but access to the distribution itself. This distribution model created its own form of scarcity. The codes were physically limited, with retailers receiving set quantities that often ran out quickly. Players in rural areas or regions without participating stores had no way to obtain codes at all. The distribution window was brief, typically lasting only a week or two, meaning that players who missed the announcement or were unavailable during that specific time frame lost their opportunity permanently. And because the codes were region-locked to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon specifically, players who only owned the earlier Sun and Moon games or who lived in unsupported regions were entirely excluded. The result is a shiny whose rarity is purely a function of geographic and temporal constraints. Shiny Poipole isn't rare because it's hard to find or difficult to hunt. It's rare because Game Freak chose to distribute it in limited quantities through specific channels for a brief period. This represents a fundamentally different philosophy of rarity, one that prioritizes controlled distribution over hunting challenge. For collectors, it's no less valuable, as a limited event distribution is just as irreversible as a discontinued event item. But it does reflect how the nature of rare shinies has evolved alongside changes in how Game Freak manages mythical and special Pokemon. Before we drift any further, it's important to acknowledge how these distribution patterns have affected the collecting community. In earlier generations, dedicated hunters could theoretically obtain any shiny through enough patience and effort, even if accessing the encounter required rare event items. The existence of soft resettable encounters meant that the community could develop strategies, share knowledge, and work toward rare variants through skill and determination. Modern distribution-locked shinies remove this element, replacing hunting skill with simple event participation. For some collectors, this feels less satisfying, as the achievement comes from being in the right place at the right time, rather than mastering a difficult hunt. Visually, Shiny Poipole undergoes a striking transformation that makes it one of the most visually impressive Ultra Beast shinies. Its standard purple and black coloration shifts to bright white and yellow, creating an appearance that looks almost crystalline and futuristic. The change is dramatic and instantly noticeable, making Shiny Poipole stand out even among other rare variants. This visual appeal, combined with its evolution into Nagnadal, which retains the same white and yellow palette, makes legitimate Shiny Poipole highly sought after in both collector and competitive communities. If you're still awake halfway through, maybe subscribe before you drift off, and tell me what time it is where you're watching from. Zeraora presents another example of modern event-exclusive rarity, following the same distribution model that defined Shiny Poipole, but with even tighter restrictions. Introduced in Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon as a mythical electric type, Zeraora was never available through normal gameplay, instead being distributed exclusively through events. For most of its existence, Zeraora could only be obtained in its standard form through these events, with no shiny variant available at all. This changed in 2020 with Pokemon Sword and Shield, but the circumstances surrounding Shiny Zeraora's release created one of the most unusual distribution models in the franchise's history. Rather than distributing Shiny Zeraora through traditional code-based events, Game Freak tied its release to a community challenge. Players needed to collectively defeat 1 million Zeraora in max raid battles within a specific time frame. If the community succeeded, every player who participated would receive a shiny Zeraora as a reward. This model created a form of rarity that was simultaneously more accessible and more restricted than traditional distributions. On one hand, any player who owned Sword or Shield and participated in the event would receive the shiny variant, potentially making it more common than code-based distributions. On the other hand, the event was time-limited and required active participation during a specific window, meaning that players who missed it had no alternative path to obtain shiny Zeraora. The community did succeed in the challenge, and shiny Zeraora was distributed to participants. But the time-limited nature of the event and the requirement to actively participate during that specific period created the same irreversible window that defines other rare shinies. Players who weren't playing Pokemon during that time frame, who didn't own Sword or Shield yet, or who simply missed the announcement, have no way to obtain legitimate shiny Zeraora through current official means. This creates a population of legitimate specimens that will never grow larger than the number of players who participated in that original event, making it rare through historical circumstance, even if the distribution was technically more widespread than traditional code-based events. What makes shiny Zeraora particularly interesting from a rarity perspective is that it represents Game Freak experimenting with alternative distribution models. Rather than simply releasing codes through retail partners, they created a community event that required collective effort and engagement. This approach feels more interactive and potentially more memorable for participants, as they can say they were part of the global community that unlocked shiny Zeraora rather than simply redeeming a code. But it also means that the Pokemon's rarity is tied to participating in a specific moment of community coordination that can never be replicated. Visually, shiny Zeraora shifts from its standard blue and yellow electric coloration to white and cyan, creating an appearance that feels clean and ethereal. The transformation maintains Zeraora's sleek, feline design while giving it a distinct identity that makes it instantly recognizable. For competitive players, Zeraora's strong stats and electric typing make it viable in various battle formats, adding practical value to its rarity. The combination of visual appeal, competitive utility, and unique distribution history makes a shiny Zeraora a prized addition to any collection. Slowly, the story widens to encompass not just individual rare shinies, but the broader patterns that create rarity in the Pokemon franchise. Game Freak's approach to mythical and event-exclusive Pokemon has evolved considerably over the series' nearly 3-decade history. In early generations, mythical Pokemon were often kept secret, discovered through rumors, glitches, or official reveals that came months or years after a game's release. Mew in Generation 1, Celebi in Generation 2. These creatures existed at the edges of the known Pokédex, their presence creating mysteries that drove community speculation and bonded players through shared secrets. As the franchise matured and the internet made information more widely accessible, Game Freak shifted toward more controlled mythical distributions. Rather than hiding creatures in the code and letting players discover them organically, later generations announced mythicals as part of a game's marketing and distributed them through official events. This change made mythicals more accessible in terms of knowing they existed and having clear paths to obtain them, but it also made the distribution process more centralized and controlled. Event items were distributed through specific channels, codes required participation in promotional partnerships, and time windows were carefully managed to create urgency and exclusivity. This evolution in distribution philosophy directly impacted which shinies became rare and how that rarity was created. In generations 3 and 4, rarity often emerged from unreleased items or items with extremely limited distributions, creating situations where players had the theoretical ability to hunt shinies if only they could access the encounter. In later generations, rarity came from choosing which event distributions would feature shiny variants and which would lock them to standard colorations. The source of rarity shifted from access to encounters to access to specific events, changing how collectors approached building their collections. One consequence of this shift is that modern rare shinies are often more clearly identifiable and verifiable than older ones. Event-distributed Pokémon carry specific ribbons, trainer information, and encounter metadata that distinguish them from hunted or bred specimens. A legitimate shiny Poipole must be in a Cherish Ball, must have the classic ribbon, must match the exact level and moveset of the distribution, and must carry correct wonder data from the event period. Any deviation from these parameters almost certainly indicates an illegitimate version. This creates a form of built-in authentication that makes collecting safer in some ways, as the criteria for legitimacy are very clear and violations are usually obvious. But this verifiability also means that illegitimate versions are easier to create and distribute. Because the event parameters are well documented, players with technical knowledge can generate Pokémon that match all the required criteria, creating specimens that are functionally indistinguishable from legitimate ones in terms of their data structure. The Pokémon community has developed tools and verification processes to identify these generated Pokémon, looking for subtle inconsistencies in how data is structured or comparing against known legitimate distributions. But the arms race between verification and generation continues, making the provenance of rare event shinies an ongoing concern for serious collectors. This dynamic creates interesting social structures within the collecting community. Players who obtained rare shinies through legitimate participation in original events hold creatures with clear provenance. They have screenshots, save files, and personal memories that verify their Pokémon's authenticity. Those who acquire rare shinies through trades must rely on verification tools and community expertise to assess legitimacy, never being entirely certain unless they can trace the Pokémon's history back to its original source. This has created a culture where documentation matters as much as the Pokémon themselves, where screenshots of redemption screens and photos of event participation carry significant value as proof of legitimacy. In some ways, this mirrors real-world collecting of rare items, where provenance and documentation determine value as much as the object itself. A painting isn't valuable just because it looks like a Rembrandt. It's valuable because it can be traced back to Rembrandt's studio through documented ownership chains. Similarly, a shiny Arceus isn't valuable just because its data matches event parameters. It's valuable because it can be traced back to a specific distribution through credible documentation. This emphasis on provenance elevates the collecting aspect of Pokémon beyond simple gameplay, transforming rare shinies into digital artifacts with their own historical narratives. The discussion of rare shinies must also acknowledge the role of unofficial means of obtaining Pokémon. Throughout the franchise's history, dedicated players have discovered glitches, exploits, and unintended mechanics that allow access to Pokemon that should be unobtainable. The Mew glitch in Generation 1, Void glitches in Generation 4, and various trading exploits across multiple generations have all created paths to mythical Pokemon that bypass official distributions. These methods exist in a gray area. They're not official distributions, but they're not always classified as cheating either, as they use in-game mechanics rather than external modification tools. For shiny hunting specifically, some of these glitches have created opportunities to hunt mythicals that were never intended to be huntable. The cute charm glitch in Generation 4, for instance, allows players to manipulate encounter rates in ways that make shiny hunting more reliable. The Pomeg glitch and other void manipulation techniques can potentially access mythical encounters that were programmed into the game but never officially released. These methods have allowed a small subset of extremely dedicated players to obtain shiny mythicals through in-game means, even if those means were never intended by Game Freak. The legitimacy of Pokemon obtained through glitches is heavily debated within the community. Some collectors argue that glitches are part of the game's code, and using them is no different from exploiting any other unintended mechanic. Others maintain that anything obtained outside of official distributions is illegitimate by definition, regardless of whether external tools were used. This debate has no clear resolution, as different community spaces and trading platforms have different standards for what they consider legitimate. But it highlights how rarity in Pokemon isn't just about mathematical probability or historical access. It's also about community-defined standards of legitimacy that shape how rare creatures are valued and traded. As technology has advanced, the line between glitches and hacks has become more nuanced. Modern Pokemon games include anti-cheat measures that detect certain forms of data manipulation, flagging Pokemon that couldn't have been obtained through any legitimate means. But these measures aren't perfect, and they can't always distinguish between a Pokemon obtained through careful glitch exploitation and one generated through external tools. The result is an ongoing tension between Game Freak's attempts to maintain the integrity of distributions and players' desire to access content that was programmed into games but never officially released. There's a quiet comfort in remembering moments like these, when the boundaries of what's possible in a game become blurred through player creativity and determination. The history of Pokemon is filled with stories of players pushing against limitations, discovering secrets the developers never intended to be found, and creating their own paths to rare creatures when official channels proved too restrictive. These stories are as much a part of the franchise's legacy as the official distributions themselves, representing a form of player agency and community knowledge that exists parallel to the intended experience. Another dimension of shiny rarity emerges from Pokemon that are technically obtainable, but exist under such restrictive circumstances that legitimate specimens are extraordinarily rare in practice. Spinda provides an interesting example of this phenomenon. Spinda is notable for having over 4 billion possible spot patterns based on its personality value, making each individual Spinda visually unique. When shiny hunting Spinda, players are not just searching for the 1 in 4,096 odds of encountering a shiny, but also attempting to find a shiny with a specific spot pattern if they're seeking a particular aesthetic. The mathematics of hunting for a specific shiny Spinda with a specific pattern creates probabilities so astronomical that it borders on impossibility. With over 4 billion patterns and standard shiny odds, the chance of encountering any given shiny Spinda pattern is effectively 1 in 16 trillion. This number is so large that even with modern shiny hunting techniques and unlimited time, the odds of finding a specific combination are negligible. Some collectors do hunt for shiny Spinda with particular patterns they find aesthetically pleasing, but the acknowledgement is always that they're searching within a space of possibilities so vast that true completion is impossible. This creates a form of rarity that's different from event distributions or unreleased items. Shiny Spinda isn't rare because access is limited. Any player can encounter Spinda in games where it appears. It's rare because the search space is so enormous that finding specific variants approaches practical impossibility. For collectors who do obtain shiny Spinda with patterns they like, the achievement comes not from historical circumstances, but from pure statistical triumph against overwhelming odds. It represents a return to rarity through probability rather than distribution, but at a scale that makes even standard shiny hunting seem simple by comparison. Unown presents a similar dynamic, though through different mechanics. Unown has 28 possible forms representing letters of the alphabet, plus exclamation and question marks. In most games, each form must be hunted separately, as Unown encounters are determined by factors including location and other variables depending on the specific game. Hunting for a complete shiny Unown alphabet means successfully finding 28 separate shiny Unown, each representing a different letter. At standard odds, this represents a collective probability that makes completion an extraordinary achievement. Some games have made shiny Unown hunting more accessible by allowing players to influence which form appears, but even then, the dedication required to complete a full shiny alphabet is massive. Each individual shiny Unown might take thousands of encounters to find, and multiplying that effort across 28 forms creates a hunt that could easily consume years of dedicated effort. Collectors who have completed shiny Unown alphabets are recognized within the community as having achieved something exceptional, not because the Pokémon themselves are locked behind impossible distributions, but because the sustained effort required demonstrates extraordinary patience and commitment. These examples highlight how rarity in Pokémon exists on multiple axes simultaneously. Historical rarity, created by limited distributions and discontinued events. Statistical rarity, emerging from probability alone. Effort-based rarity, resulting from hunts so demanding that few players are willing to complete them. Each form creates value differently, and collectors often specialize in pursuing particular types of rarity based on what appeals to them. Some prefer the historical significance of event-exclusive creatures, others enjoy the challenge of full odds hunts, and still others appreciate the completion aspect of collecting entire shiny families or forms. The philosophy behind why Game Freak creates rare shinies has shifted over time, reflecting changing priorities in how the company approaches the franchise. Early mythical distributions were often tied to movie promotions or special events in Japan, creating strong connections between the games and other media. These distributions felt exclusive but purposeful, celebrating specific moments in the franchise's broader narrative. As Pokémon became a global phenomenon, distributions became more international, but also more marketing-focused, tied to retail partnerships and promotional campaigns that served business objectives as much as player engagement. In recent years, there's been a slight shift back toward accessibility, with some previously rare Pokémon receiving wider distributions or being made available through in-game means in remakes. Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, for instance, included Mew and Jirachi as rewards for players who owned saves from other Pokémon games, creating a new path to these mythicals that didn't exist in the original Diamond and Pearl. These decisions make the Pokémon themselves more accessible, but don't diminish the rarity of shiny variants from earlier distributions, as those remain locked to their historical contexts. This approach allows Game Freak to satisfy both collectors who value historical rarity and newer players who want access to mythicals without needing to track down decade-old events. The original Shiny Mew from Emerald remains extraordinarily rare because its circumstances can never be replicated, but players who simply want a Mew for their Pokédex have modern options. This balance between preservation of historical value and accessibility for new generations seems to be the direction the franchise is heading, acknowledging that different players value different aspects of collecting. As we continue this gentle journey through the landscape of rare shinies, it's worth reflecting on what these creatures represent beyond their in-game data. For many collectors, rare shinies are more than just alternate colorations or valuable trade assets. They're mementos of specific moments in personal gaming history, reminders of events attended, challenges overcome, or communities participated in. A shiny Darkrai from the original member card distribution doesn't just represent a rare Pokémon, it represents being part of the Pokémon community in 2009, participating in distributions when they happened, and experiencing the franchise during a specific era of its evolution. These personal narratives add layers of meaning to rare shinies that go beyond their technical rarity. Two players might both own Shiny Poipole from the 2018 distribution, and while the Pokémon themselves are functionally identical, their stories might be completely different. One player might have stood in line at GameStop for an hour to get their code, while another might have received theirs through an online distribution. These different experiences of obtaining the same Pokémon create individual stories that make collecting personal and meaningful rather than purely transactional. The community aspect of rare shiny collecting has created rich social networks within the broader Pokémon fandom. Trading communities, verification forums, and shiny hunting discords bring together players who share specific interests in particular types of rare Pokémon. These communities develop their own cultures, standards, and knowledge bases, creating specialized expertise around authentication, trading ethics, and historical distributions. For some players, being part of these communities becomes as valuable as the Pokémon themselves, offering social connection through shared interests and collaborative knowledge building. This social dimension also creates hierarchies of prestige within collecting communities. Players who own multiple rare event shinies, who can document their legitimacy clearly, or who have participated in numerous historical distributions gain recognition and status within these spaces. This isn't necessarily about showing off or competition, though those elements exist, but more about establishing expertise and credibility. When someone offers to trade a rare shiny, their reputation within the community often matters as much as the Pokémon's data, as trust becomes essential when dealing with creatures whose legitimacy can be difficult to verify. The evolution of trading systems across Pokémon generations has significantly impacted how rare shinies circulate within the community. Early generations had limited trading capabilities, with link cables requiring physical proximity, and later generations introducing wireless trading that still required geographic nearness. The introduction of global trading through Wi-Fi in Generation 4, and later through internet-based systems, dramatically expanded the potential market for rare Pokémon, allowing collectors across the world to connect and trade. But this expansion also made verification more challenging, as the anonymity of online trading made it easier for illegitimate Pokémon to enter circulation. Modern trading platforms like Pokémon Home attempt to balance accessibility with security, implementing measures to detect obviously illegitimate Pokémon while still allowing players to trade freely. But no automated system can catch every generated Pokémon, especially when generators become sophisticated enough to replicate every detail of legitimate distributions. This puts the burden of verification back on the community, which has developed increasingly sophisticated tools and methods for identifying subtle inconsistencies that might indicate illegitimate origins. The technical arms race between generators and verifiers creates an interesting parallel to anti-counterfeiting measures in physical collectibles. Just as currency designers add increasingly complex security features to stay ahead of counterfeiters, the Pokemon community develops ever more detailed authentication criteria to identify generated Pokemon. And just as counterfeiters adapt to new security measures, generators evolve to match new verification standards. This ongoing process means that what counts as verifiably legitimate shifts over time, with older authentication methods becoming obsolete as generators become more sophisticated. For collectors focused on rare shinies, this environment requires developing expertise not just in obtaining Pokemon, but in verifying them. Learning to identify proper ribbons, checking encounter data against known distributions, understanding how personality values and encryption constants work. These technical skills become essential for serious collecting. Some collectors become specialized verifiers, offering their expertise to help others authenticate rare Pokemon and building reputations as trusted authorities within their communities. This knowledge-based hierarchy adds intellectual depth to collecting, transforming it from simply owning rare items into understanding the technical systems that make those items rare. Before we move deeper into specific examples, it's worth considering the philosophical question of whether rarity created by distributions is as meaningful as rarity created by probability. Some argue that event-exclusive shinies feel less earned than hunted ones, since obtaining them requires being in the right place at the right time, rather than demonstrating skill or dedication. Others counter that historical rarity is more interesting precisely because it's irreversible, creating creatures whose populations are permanently fixed, rather than slowly growing as more hunters succeed. Both perspectives have merit, and most collectors appreciate different types of rarity for different reasons. A shiny legendary hunted at full odds in a modern game represents dedication and patience. The hunter likely spent dozens or hundreds of hours soft resetting to succeed. An event-exclusive shiny represents participation in a specific moment of Pokemon history. The owner was engaged with the franchise at the right time and took action to obtain something that's now impossible to get. These are different forms of achievement, both valid and both meaningful to different collectors for different reasons. What unifies most rare shiny collectors is an appreciation for the stories behind these Pokemon. Whether the story is about grinding through thousands of encounters, attending a specific event, or being part of a limited distribution, each rare shiny carries a narrative that makes it more than just data. This narrative dimension is what separates collecting from simply accumulating, the difference between having a Pokemon and having a story about how you obtained it. For many collectors, these stories become intertwined with their personal history of playing Pokemon, marking specific periods of their lives through the creatures they obtained during those times. Celebi represents another mythical, whose shiny variant exists in multiple forms with varying degrees of rarity. Like other early mythicals, Celebi was designed to be special and elusive, with its time-traveling lore and connection to forests making it a beloved creature among fans. Throughout the franchise's history, Celebi has been distributed through various events, some of which included shiny variants, while others locked it to standard coloration. This has created a situation where shiny Celebi from different distributions carry different levels of prestige based on how limited those specific events were. The Pokemon Crystal Virtual Console release in 2018 included a special event where players could obtain Celebi through in-game means by visiting Ilex Forest after completing certain story objectives. This encounter was soft resettable and subject to normal shiny odds, making it the first widely accessible, legitimate way to hunt shiny Celebi without relying on extremely limited Japanese events from years prior. The Virtual Console release democratized shiny Celebi hunting to some degree, allowing dedicated players worldwide to attempt the hunt, regardless of their geographic location or whether they'd participated in past events. But even this more accessible path came with challenges. The Virtual Console version was only available for a limited time on the Nintendo 3DS eShop before the service shut down. Players who wanted to hunt shiny Celebi needed to purchase the Virtual Console version during its availability window and complete the hunt before moving on to other games or losing access to their 3DS systems. In hunting at full Generation 2 odds, which use the same 1 in 8,192 probability as later generations, but with slower soft reset times, still required significant dedication. The hunt might take weeks or months of regular attempts, making success an achievement, even though the method itself was more accessible than previous Celebi distributions. Shiny Celebi has also been distributed directly through events, most notably through Pokémon movie promotions in Japan and certain international events tied to other media releases. These event Celebi are guaranteed shiny, but come with fixed stats and preset parameters, distinguishing them from hunted ones. For collectors, this creates multiple categories of shiny Celebi, each with its own rarity profile. Celebi hunted from Virtual Console Crystal are relatively more common among dedicated hunters, but still represent significant effort. Event-distributed shiny Celebi from specific limited promotions remain rare because only players who participated in those exact events possess them. Visually, shiny Celebi transforms from its soft green coloration to a pink tone that feels gentle and magical. The change maintains Celebi's cute, fairy-like aesthetic while creating a distinct visual identity. Pink shiny Celebi has become iconic among shiny hunters, often featured in community showcases and collections as an example of aesthetically pleasing shiny designs. The combination of its time-traveling lore, its historical significance as an early mythical, and its appealing shiny form makes Celebi a popular target for collectors who appreciate both visual design and narrative significance. Jirachi follows a similar pattern to Celebi, existing across multiple distributions with varying degrees of accessibility. Introduced in Generation 3, Jirachi was originally distributed through a bonus disc included with certain GameCube games, specifically Pokémon Colosseum in North America. This distribution method made Jirachi relatively accessible compared to some other mythicals, as any player who owned both a GameCube and Colosseum could obtain one. However, these Colosseum Jirachi were locked to standard coloration, with no possibility of being shiny. Shiny Jirachi became accessible through different means in later generations, most notably through specific event distributions tied to movie promotions or other special occasions. Like Celebi, these events varied in their reach and duration, creating different populations of shiny Jirachi with different levels of rarity. Some distributions were limited to Japan, others reached international audiences, and each came with its own set of parameters that distinguish legitimate specimens from generated ones. The most accessible path to shiny Jirachi for modern collectors came through Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which included Jirachi as a bonus for players who had save data from Pokémon Sword or Shield. This Jirachi could be shiny, and because the encounter could be soft reset, players could hunt for the shiny variant at modern odds. This made shiny Jirachi significantly more accessible than it had been previously, though it still required owning multiple Pokémon games and being willing to hunt at 1 in 4,096 odds. What's interesting about the Jirachi case is how it demonstrates Game Freak's willingness to revisit previously rare Pokémon and make them more accessible through new methods. The original event Jirachi from early Generation 3 distributions remain rare and historically significant, but newer players have paths to obtain shiny Jirachi that didn't exist when those events occurred. This approach preserves the value of historical specimens while acknowledging that artificial scarcity can create frustration for players who simply want to complete their collections without necessarily caring about having the rarest possible variants. Shiny Jirachi's visual transformation shifts its bright yellow body and blue accents to red and dark blue, creating a color scheme that feels festive and bold. The change is dramatic enough to be immediately noticeable, while maintaining Jirachi's overall aesthetic as a wish-granting star Pokémon. For collectors who appreciate visually striking shinies, Jirachi ranks highly, and its combination of accessible modern hunts and rare historical distributions makes it appeal to collectors with different priorities. Deoxys occupies yet another niche in the ecosystem of rare mythical shinies. Introduced in Generation 3 as an alien Pokémon with multiple forms, Deoxys was originally distributed through events that gave players the Aurora Ticket, an item that allowed access to Birth Island, where Deoxys could be encountered. Like other Generation 3 mythical encounters, this was a soft resettable battle subject to normal shiny odds, making shiny Deoxys theoretically huntable for players who obtained the Aurora Ticket. But the Aurora Ticket distribution was extremely limited, occurring primarily at specific events in major cities and never reaching many regions at all. Players in areas without events had no legitimate way to access Birth Island, making even standard Deoxys rare during the Generation 3 era. For those who did obtain the Aurora Ticket, hunting shiny Deoxys at 1 in 8,192 odds with Generation 3's slower soft reset times represented a massive undertaking. The combination of limited item access and full odds hunting created a population of shiny Deoxys specimens so small that legitimate ones from Generation 3 are extraordinarily rare. In later generations, Deoxys became more accessible through different means. Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire included Deoxys as part of the main stories post-game, allowing all players to encounter it without needing event items. This encounter was shiny locked, however, meaning that while Deoxys itself became widely available, its shiny variant remained out of reach through normal gameplay. Event distributions in later generations occasionally included shiny Deoxys, but these remained limited and tied to specific promotions. The most notable modern path to shiny Deoxys comes through Pokemon Go, which has featured Deoxys in raids during specific events. These raids can produce shiny variants, and because Pokemon caught in Go can be transferred to main series games through Pokemon Home, this creates a legitimate path to shiny Deoxys for players willing to engage with the mobile game. However, Deoxys raids in Go are themselves limited events, appearing only during specific time frames and requiring either in-person coordination or remote raid access. This creates a form of rarity that's different from main series distributions, but still dependent on participating during limited windows. For collectors focused specifically on main series games, shiny Deoxys from the original Aurora Ticket encounters in Generation 3 remain the most prestigious variants. These represent both historical significance and genuine hunting challenge, combining the scarcity of the Aurora Ticket distribution with the difficulty of succeeding at full odds. Specimens from later event distributions or Pokemon Go transfers are less rare but still carry value for collectors who simply want a shiny Deoxys for their collection without necessarily prioritizing the specific origin. Deoxys's shiny forms vary depending on which of its 4 forms it's in, but all feature a shift from the standard red-orange coloration to teal and blue tones. The change is striking and maintains good contrast across all forms, making shiny Deoxys visually appealing regardless of which form a collector prefers. This visual consistency across forms adds to its collecting appeal, as a single shiny Deoxys can be displayed in multiple forms without losing its distinct shiny identity. There's a quiet comfort in remembering moments like these, when rare Pokémon feel genuinely rare, not just because of numbers on a spreadsheet, but because of the effort and circumstances required to obtain them. The landscape of rare shinies is vast and complex, filled with creatures whose stories span decades of franchise history and touch on everything from game development decisions to community coordination to individual dedication. Each rare shiny exists within multiple contexts simultaneously, as game data, as collectible item, as personal achievement, and as artifact of a specific moment in Pokemon's ongoing evolution. As we drift toward the conclusion of this exploration, it's worth reflecting on why rare shinies matter to collectors beyond their technical scarcity. In a franchise as large and long-running as Pokémon, with over 1,000 species and countless variants, finding ways to create meaningful specialization helps collectors develop personal relationships with specific aspects of the games. Some collectors focus on completing living Pokédexes, others hunt shiny forms of their favorite species, still others pursue rare events and distributions. These different approaches to collecting allow players to engage with Pokémon in ways that feel personally meaningful, rather than trying to achieve everything simultaneously. Rare shinies serve as markers of dedication and participation, physical evidence of time spent with the games and the community. They're conversation starters, connecting collectors who share interests in specific distributions or hunting methods. They're challenges that can occupy players for months or years, providing long-term goals that extend engagement beyond simply beating the main story. And they're beautiful, offering aesthetic variety that keeps the visual experience fresh even after encountering the same species hundreds of times. The value placed on rare shinies also reflects broader human tendencies toward collecting and prestige. Throughout history, humans have assigned special significance to rare items, from precious gems to limited artworks to historically significant artifacts. Pokémon taps into these same psychological drives, creating digital items whose rarity makes them feel valuable even though they exist as code rather than physical objects. The emotional attachment players develop to their rare shinies mirrors the attachment collectors feel toward any prized possession, and the care taken to preserve and protect these digital creatures reflects how seriously the community takes their collecting. Looking forward, it's unclear how Game Freak will handle rare shinies in future generations. Will they continue making previously unobtainable shinies available through new methods, gradually reducing the overall rarity of older specimens? Or will they preserve the exclusivity of historical distributions, accepting that some variants will remain permanently rare? The answer likely falls somewhere between these extremes, with some Pokémon receiving wider availability, while others remain tied to their original limited circumstances. This balance allows the franchise to respect its history while remaining accessible to new players, acknowledging both the value of rarity and the frustration of permanent unavailability. What seems certain is that rare shinies will continue to hold fascination for dedicated collectors regardless of how distribution policies evolve. The stories behind these creatures, the communities that form around hunting and trading them, and the personal achievements they represent ensure that rarity in Pokémon extends beyond simple probability into something more meaningful and enduring. As long as players value dedication, history, and the thrill of obtaining something extraordinary, rare shinies will remain a vital part of the Pokemon collecting experience. The intersection of rarity and legitimacy creates fascinating tensions within the collecting community that deserve deeper exploration. When a shiny Pokemon is exceptionally rare, the temptation to generate illegitimate versions increases proportionally. This creates an environment where collectors must develop sophisticated verification skills or rely on trusted community members to authenticate their acquisitions. The technical knowledge required to distinguish legitimate rare shinies from generated ones has become its own specialized field within the broader Pokemon community. Understanding how Pokemon data is structured provides insight into why verification is both possible and challenging. Every Pokemon carries extensive metadata that records information about its origin, including where it was encountered, what date it was obtained, which trainer caught it, and various other parameters. For event-distributed Pokemon, this metadata must match specific patterns that correspond to the actual event distribution. A shiny Arceus from a particular Japanese movie promotion will have specific trainer ID numbers, specific ribbons, and specific encounter data that distinguish it from Arceus distributed through other events or obtained through other means. Legitimate Pokemon obtained through proper channels will have metadata that aligns perfectly with documented event parameters. The encryption constants will be properly generated. The personality values will match the shiny status correctly. The origin game will be appropriate for the distribution method, and numerous other technical details will all align in ways that reflect genuine game-generated data. Generated Pokemon can match many of these parameters, but subtle inconsistencies often emerge in how the data is structured, providing clues to experienced verifiers that something isn't quite right. The community has developed tools to analyze Pokemon data at a technical level, examining the underlying structure to identify potential issues. These tools check for illegal move combinations, impossible encounter locations, incorrect ability slots, and countless other parameters that must be correct for a Pokemon to be legitimate. While no automated tool can catch every generated Pokemon, especially as generation techniques become more sophisticated, these verification systems provide valuable screening that helps collectors identify obvious fakes and focus their manual verification efforts on more subtle cases. What makes verification particularly challenging for the rarest shinies is that their low population means there's limited comparative data available. When thousands of people have hunted a particular shiny legendary, the community accumulates extensive examples of legitimate specimens that can be compared against suspicious ones. But when a shiny only exists from a single event distribution that occurred 15 years ago in Japan, finding confirmed legitimate examples for comparison becomes much more difficult. This scarcity of reference material makes it authentication harder and increases the value of Pokemon with clear, documented provenance. Photography and video evidence have become important tools for establishing provenance. Collectors who obtain rare shinies during their original distributions often document the process, taking photos of redemption screens, recording encounters, or otherwise creating evidence that they participated in the event. These records become valuable proof of legitimacy, creating a chain of custody that's much harder to fabricate than simply generating a Pokemon with correct parameters. In some trading communities, rare shinies without documented provenance are viewed with skepticism regardless of how perfect their data appears. This emphasis on documentation has created interesting parallels to traditional collectibles markets. Just as art collectors maintain provenance records to establish that a painting is genuine and has a traceable ownership history, Pokemon collectors maintain evidence trails that document their rare specimen's origins. The value isn't just in the object itself, but in the proof that it's authentic, and collectors who maintain comprehensive documentation often find their collections more valued and trusted within the community. The social dynamics of trading rare shinies reflect these verification challenges. Traders with established reputations, who are known within the community for owning legitimate collections and being honest about their Pokemon's origins, can trade rare specimens more easily than unknown traders. This creates a trust-based economy where reputation capital matters as much as the Pokemon themselves. New collectors entering the rare shiny trading scene often struggle to establish credibility, as their lack of trading history makes others hesitant to trade truly rare specimens with them. These trust networks extend beyond simple one-on-one trades to encompass broader community structures. Discord servers, subreddit communities, and trading forums develop their own cultures around verification and legitimacy. Some communities are strict, requiring extensive proof of legitimacy before allowing rare Pokemon to be traded. Others are more relaxed, accepting Pokemon that pass basic legality checks without demanding deeper verification. Collectors often participate in multiple communities simultaneously, developing different trading relationships and reputations across different platforms. The economics of rare, shiny trading create additional complexity. While Pokemon cannot be officially sold for real money, the time and effort invested in obtaining rare specimens creates implicit value that manifests in various ways. Traders negotiate exchanges based on perceived rarity, with exceptionally rare shinies often requiring multiple less rare specimens in return to balance perceived value. This creates informal valuation hierarchies where the community collectively determines how rare different Pokemon are relative to each other, shaping trading patterns and preferences. These valuations shift over time as Game Freak releases new distributions or makes previously rare Pokemon more accessible. When Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl made Shiny Jirachi more huntable, for instance, the trading value of Shiny Jirachi decreased relative to Pokemon that remained strictly event exclusive. Collectors who had invested significant trading capital to acquire Shiny Jirachi before this change saw their investments devalue, while those who waited benefited from increased accessibility. These dynamics mirror real-world collectibles markets, where reprints or new releases can affect the value of original items. Understanding these market dynamics helps collectors make strategic decisions about which rare shinies to pursue. Some focus on historically rare specimens that seem unlikely to ever be redistributed, betting that their scarcity will remain permanent and their value will appreciate over time. Others hunt currently available shinies during their distribution windows, anticipating that missing the opportunity will make them rare in the future. Still others focus on complete sets or themed collections rather than individual rare specimens, pursuing personal satisfaction over trading value. The psychological appeal of rare shinies extends beyond simple collecting instincts to touch on deeper human desires for achievement and recognition. Obtaining an exceptionally rare shiny represents overcoming significant challenges, whether those challenges involve being in the right place at the right time, dedicating hundreds of hours to a difficult hunt, or successfully navigating complex trading networks to acquire a specimen. This achievement provides satisfaction that transcends the Pokemon's utility in battle or its visual appeal, creating emotional investment that makes these creatures feel personally meaningful. For some collectors, rare shinies become markers of identity within the Pokemon community. Being known as someone who owns multiple event-exclusive mythicals or who has completed extraordinarily difficult hunts creates social recognition and respect. This recognition isn't purely about showing off, but about being acknowledged as a dedicated, knowledgeable member of the community who has invested significant time and effort into the hobby. The social dimension of collecting transforms rare shinies from individual achievements into shared cultural touchstones that facilitate community bonding. The competitive aspect of rare shiny collecting exists, but often takes subtle forms. Rather than direct competition, where collectors try to outdo each other, the competition is usually more about personal goals and milestones. Collectors challenge themselves to complete specific sets, obtain Pokémon from particular distributions, or achieve hunts that few others have completed. Sharing these achievements with the community creates the opportunities for recognition and celebration rather than rivalry, as most collectors appreciate others' successes and offer congratulations rather than envy. This collaborative spirit manifests in how the community shares information about distributions, hunting methods, and verification techniques. When new event distributions are announced, collectors quickly share information across platforms to ensure as many people as possible know about the opportunity. When new shiny hunting methods are discovered, tutorials and guides proliferate to help others learn the techniques. When verification questions arise, experienced collectors offer their expertise to help authenticate suspicious Pokémon. This knowledge-sharing culture strengthens the community and helps preserve the legitimacy of rare collections. The role of nostalgia in rare shiny collecting cannot be overlooked. Many collectors pursue rare shinies from generations they played during their childhood, seeking to recapture feelings associated with their earliest Pokémon experiences. A shiny Celebi might be valuable, not just because it's rare, but because it represents a connection to playing Pokémon Gold or Silver as a child, a tangible link to memories of exploring Johto and experiencing the magic of Generation 2 for the first time. This emotional resonance makes certain rare shinies more personally meaningful than others, regardless of their relative scarcity. Different generations of Pokémon games evoke different nostalgic responses, creating varied priorities among collectors. Those who grew up with Generation 3 often have particular attachment to Hoenn's mythicals and the era's limited distributions. Generation 4 players might focus on Sinnoh's creation trio and the complex lore surrounding Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. These generational preferences create diverse collecting scenes where different rare shinies hold different levels of prestige, depending on which communities you participate in and which games shaped your early Pokémon experiences. The technical evolution of shiny hunting across generations reflects how Game Freak has gradually refined probability mechanics and hunting methods. Early generations had relatively crude implementations where shininess was tied to specific IV combinations or determined purely by personality values. Modern generations have more sophisticated systems that separate cosmetic features from battle-relevant stats, allowing players to hunt for shinies without necessarily compromising competitive viability. This evolution has made shiny hunting more accessible and less frustrating, though it has also reduced the technical challenge that made early hunts feel more significant to some collectors. Specific hunting methods have become associated with particular generations, creating sub-communities focused on mastering those techniques. The Masuda method breeding in Generation 4 onward created a breeding-focused hunting community that values patience and careful IV management. Chain fishing in Generation 6 attracted hunters who enjoyed the methodical rhythm of consecutive encounters. The SOS chaining method in Generation 7 developed its own following among players who appreciated balancing chain maintenance with encounter optimization. Each method creates its own hunting culture with unique strategies and community knowledge. Soft resetting remains the fundamental hunting method for static encounters across all generations, but the experience varies significantly depending on the game and platform. Resetting on original Game Boy Advance hardware requires physically toggling the power switch, creating a tactile rhythm that some hunters find meditative. Resetting on DS games involves pressing button combinations that become muscle memory after thousands of attempts. Modern games on Switch allow for quicker resets but require navigating through longer boot sequences and dialogue. These mechanical differences affect how hunting feels and which encounters hunters find most enjoyable to pursue. The community has developed elaborate strategies for optimizing soft reset efficiency. Hunters position their save files immediately before encounters to minimize the time between resets. They develop timing routines to maintain focus during long hunts, taking breaks at regular intervals to prevent burnout. Some hunters watch streams or listen to podcasts during hunts, creating multitasking rhythms that make the repetitive process more bearable. Others prefer focused hunting, treating each reset as a meditation practice that requires full attention. These different approaches reflect varied personalities and preferences within the hunting community. Long hunts, those extending into thousands or tens of thousands of resets, test a hunter's patience and determination in ways that few other video game challenges match. The experience of hunting a full-odds shiny legendary for weeks or months without success creates a unique form of engagement with the game. Each reset brings renewed hope that this might be the successful attempt, while the growing count of failed attempts creates mounting investment that makes abandoning the hunt feel increasingly wasteful. This psychological dynamic keeps hunters engaged far longer than they might initially anticipate. Stories of exceptionally long hunts circulate within the community, becoming legendary in their own right. Hunters who succeed after 30,000 resets or more are celebrated for their persistence. Those who find shinies in just a few hundred resets are envied for their luck. The variability inherent in probability creates a wide range of experiences even for hunters pursuing identical targets, and sharing these stories creates bonds between community members who understand the emotional roller coaster of extended hunts. The moment of finally encountering a shiny after a long hunt carries emotional weight that's difficult to describe to non-hunters. The familiar encounter music, suddenly accompanied by the sparkle animation and alternate coloration, creates a rush of relief, excitement, and accomplishment. Hunters often record these moments to preserve the memory and share with their communities. The reactions captured in these videos, ranging from quiet satisfaction to explosive celebration, demonstrate how meaningful these achievements feel to those who pursue them. Catching the shiny safely becomes its own challenge after the encounter finally appears. The fear of accidentally knocking out the shiny or running out of Pokeballs creates tension that transforms what should be a triumphant moment into careful risk management. Hunters prepare for this scenario by stocking up on balls beforehand, bringing Pokemon with status-inducing moves, and planning their catching strategy in advance. Despite these preparations, stories of shinies that fled or fainted before being caught haunt the community, serving as cautionary tales about the importance of careful preparation. The integration of shiny hunting into broader Pokemon culture has grown significantly over the franchise's history. What began as a niche pursuit practiced by dedicated enthusiasts has become a mainstream aspect of how many players engage with the games. Streamers broadcasting their hunts to audiences of thousands have made shiny hunting a spectator activity, with viewers participating vicariously in the hunt and celebrating successes together. This visibility has introduced many players to hunting who might not have discovered it otherwise, growing the community and increasing interest in rare shinies. Content creators who focus on shiny hunting have developed various approaches to making the repetitive process entertaining for audiences. Some provide commentary discussing Pokemon lore, game mechanics, or community news while hunting. Others create challenge runs where they hunt specific teams or attempt to complete entire shiny Pokédexes. Still others focus on the rarest hunts, pursuing event-exclusive encounters or extremely low-odds combinations that few other hunters attempt. This content diversity keeps the hunting community engaged and provides multiple entry points for new hunters to discover what appeals to them. The relationship between shiny hunting and competitive battling creates interesting intersections within the community. Some competitive players hunt for shinies of their favorite team members, combining aesthetic preference with battle viability. Others collect shiny competitive Pokemon as trophies, displaying them in online battles as symbols of dedication. The overlap between these communities isn't complete. Many hunters care little about competitive viability, while many competitive players don't hunt shinies, but the intersection creates rich opportunities for players who appreciate both aspects of the game. Breeding for competitive shiny Pokemon requires balancing multiple objectives simultaneously. Hunters must manage IVs, abilities, natures, and egg moves while also pursuing shiny odds, creating complex breeding chains that can take weeks to complete. The satisfaction of finally hatching a shiny with perfect competitive stats represents the convergence of multiple challenging pursuits, making these Pokemon particularly prized by collectors who value both form and function. Modern breeding mechanics have made this process more accessible than in earlier generations, but the time investment remains substantial. The cultural impact of rare shinies extends beyond the immediate collecting community to influence how the broader gaming world perceives Pokemon. Rare shinies serve as symbols of dedication and expertise, demonstrating that Pokemon offers depth for players seeking challenging long-term goals. News of exceptionally rare shiny acquisitions sometimes reaches mainstream gaming media, introducing the concept to audiences who might view Pokemon as primarily a children's game. These glimpses into the dedicated collecting community help establish Pokemon's legitimacy as a hobby worthy of serious investment for players of all ages. Preservation of rare shinies across hardware generations presents technical challenges that affect their long-term accessibility. As Nintendo discontinues older systems and online services, transferring Pokemon forward becomes increasingly important for maintaining access to rare specimens. The Pokemon Bank and Pokemon Home services facilitate these transfers, but they depend on active online infrastructure that will eventually be shut down. Collectors worry about what happens to their carefully accumulated rare shinies when current transfer methods become unavailable, creating urgency around moving valuable Pokemon to current generation games. The dependence on cloud services for Pokemon storage introduces vulnerabilities that physical cartridges never had. Server outages, account issues, or service discontinuation could theoretically result in loss of access to entire collections stored in Pokemon Home. While these scenarios seem unlikely in the near term, the long-term sustainability of cloud-based Pokemon storage remains a concern for collectors whose rare specimens represent years of effort. Some collectors maintain backups across multiple storage systems or keep particularly valuable Pokemon on physical cartridges as insurance against cloud service failures. Battery death in older cartridges presents another preservation challenge. Generation 1 through 3 games use battery-backed save systems that eventually fail, erasing save data and any Pokemon stored on those cartridges. Collectors with rare shinies from these generations face difficult choices about whether to transfer them forward to newer games with more reliable storage or keep them in their original contexts despite the risk of battery failure. Some choose to replace batteries in valuable cartridges, but this process carries its own risks of data corruption if not executed perfectly. The philosophical question of whether transferred Pokémon retain their full significance creates interesting debates within the community. Does a shiny Mew from Pokémon Emerald lose something essential when transferred through multiple generations to Pokémon Home? Or does its original context remain meaningful regardless of where it currently resides? Some collectors argue that keeping rare Pokémon in their original games preserves historical authenticity, while others contend that accessibility and usability matter more than maintaining original storage locations. These different perspectives reflect varied priorities about what makes rare Pokémon valuable. Regional variations in distribution patterns create geographic disparities in rare shiny availability that persist decades later. Japan consistently received more event distributions than other regions, creating situations where Japanese collectors had access to Pokémon that Western collectors could only obtain through international trading. This geographic privilege shaped collecting communities differently across regions, with Japanese collectors often possessing broader event libraries, while Western collectors developed expertise in hunting and breeding to compensate for limited event access. These regional differences add complexity to understanding global rarity, as a Pokémon's scarcity can vary dramatically depending on geographic context. Language-locked events created additional barriers, as some distributions required games in specific languages to redeem codes or receive wireless gifts. English language players often had access to broader distributions than those playing in other European languages, creating smaller collecting communities in some regions. The consolidation of European distributions in later generations helped address these disparities, but rare shinies from earlier events remain disproportionately concentrated in specific language communities. The ethics of rare shiny collecting occasionally surface in community discussions, particularly around the question of whether artificial scarcity benefits anyone. Some argue that Game Freak's decision to make certain shinies permanently unobtainable through limited distributions is anti-consumer, creating a frustration for completionist collectors who missed specific windows. Others defend limited distributions as creating meaningful scarcity that makes obtaining rare Pokémon feel genuinely special. These debates rarely reach resolution, as they reflect fundamental disagreements about whether accessibility or exclusivity better serves the collecting community. Similar ethical questions arise around trading rare shinies. Is it fair to trade a common shiny for a rare event-exclusive one if the recipient doesn't fully understand the value disparity? Should experienced collectors educate less informed traders about what they're giving up, even if it means missing an advantageous trade? Different traders answer these questions differently based on their personal ethics, creating a spectrum from strictly caveat emptor attitudes to more protective approaches that prioritize fairness over personal gain. The future of rare shiny collecting will likely be shaped by how Game Freak balances accessibility with exclusivity in upcoming generations. Recent trends suggest a move toward making previously unobtainable Pokémon available through new methods, while introducing new limited distributions to create fresh rarity. This approach allows newer players to access some historically rare specimens, while giving current players opportunities to participate in distributions that will become rare in the future. Whether this balance satisfies both completion-focused and rarity-focused collectors remains to be seen. Technological advances in future generations could potentially transform how shiny hunting works. If Game Freak implemented optional difficulty modifiers that affected shiny odds or created new hunting methods with adjustable parameters, the relationship between effort and rarity might shift significantly. Some collectors welcome innovation in hunting mechanics, viewing new methods as refreshing ways to engage with familiar pursuits. Others prefer traditional approaches, valuing the consistency of established odds and methods that create comparable challenges across generations. The potential integration of blockchain or NFT technologies into Pokémon collecting, while currently speculative, raises questions about how digital ownership might evolve. If Pokémon could be cryptographically verified and tracked through immutable records, authentication would become simpler and provenance more transparent. However, this approach would also fundamentally change the nature of Pokémon collecting, introducing elements of cryptocurrency culture that might not align with the franchise's family-friendly image. Whether Game Freak pursues these technologies or maintains traditional approaches will significantly impact how rare, shiny collecting evolves. As generations continue to release, the accumulation of rare distributions creates an ever-expanding landscape of collectible variants. Each new generation introduces dozens of Pokémon, and each Pokémon potentially has unique shiny forms that might be distributed through limited events. This exponential growth in potential collection targets means that complete collections become increasingly difficult to achieve, forcing collectors to specialize or accept that comprehensive completion is impossible. This shift towards specialization might actually strengthen collecting communities, as focused subgroups pursuing specific types of rare Pokémon develop deeper expertise and tighter social bonds. The relationship between official, distributions, and community-created content adds another layer to rare shiny culture. Fan games, ROM hacks, and other unofficial content sometimes include their own takes on rare Pokémon distribution, creating alternate collecting scenes with their own rarities and trading economies. While these unofficial specimens lack legitimacy in official contexts, they serve important functions for players who want to experience collecting without the constraints of official scarcity. Some collectors participate in both official and unofficial scenes, appreciating different aspects of each without viewing them as mutually exclusive. Preservation efforts within the community focus on documenting distribution histories and maintaining records of rare Pokémon's origins. Websites and databases catalog event distributions, listing which Pokémon were distributed when, through what methods, and in which regions. These resources serve as valuable references for authentication and help newer collectors understand the historical context of rare specimens. The community maintains these resources voluntarily, demonstrating commitment to preserving Pokémon history for future collectors who might want to understand where their rare shinies came from. As we approach the conclusion of this exploration, the significance of rare shinies as cultural artifacts becomes clear. These creatures exist at the intersection of game design, probability theory, community culture, and personal achievement. They're simultaneously data structures, status symbols, nostalgic touchstones, and ongoing projects. Their value emerges not from any single factor, but from the complex web of meanings and contexts that collectors project onto them. A shiny Darkrai from the original member card distribution is rare, yes, but it's also a connection to 2009, a technical achievement, a trust-building tool in trading communities, and a beautiful alternate coloration all at once. Understanding rare shinies requires appreciating these multiple dimensions simultaneously. The mathematical rarity matters, but so does the historical context, the verification challenges, the community relationships, the personal narratives, and the aesthetic preferences. Different collectors weight these factors differently, creating diverse perspectives on which rare shinies matter most and why. This diversity strengthens the collecting community by creating space for varied interests and priorities rather than enforcing a single hierarchy of value. The stories we tell about rare shinies shape how they're perceived and valued. When collectors share their hunting journeys, authentication struggles, or trading experiences, they're not just recounting events, but actively constructing the cultural meaning of rare Pokémon. These narratives accumulate over time, creating shared understandings of which hunts are most challenging, which distributions were most limited, and which specimens carry the most prestige. New collectors entering the community absorb these narratives and either accept them or challenge them, creating dynamic cultural evolution around rare shiny collecting. Looking back across nearly 3 decades of Pokémon history, the evolution of rare shinies reflects broader changes in how we think about digital collecting, online communities, and long-term engagement with video games. What began as an unintended consequence of how Generation 2 handled color palettes has grown into a complex collecting culture with its own norms, hierarchies, and social structures. Rare shinies have become more than just alternate colorations. They're the foundation for vibrant communities, challenging hobbies, and meaningful personal achievements. The permanence of digital scarcity, once the window for a distribution closes, creates a form of rarity that feels more final than most video game achievements. No amount of skill, dedication, or resources can grant access to distributions that occurred decades ago. This absolute boundary transforms rare shinies from difficult goals into historical artifacts, pieces of Pokémon history that can be owned but never replicated. For collectors, this permanence creates both frustration at missed opportunities and appreciation for the specimens they do possess. The tension between completionism and specialization will likely define rare shiny collecting's future, as the number of potential rare variants continues to grow. Attempting to collect everything becomes increasingly unrealistic for all but the most dedicated and connected collectors. This might actually benefit the community by encouraging specialization, allowing collectors to develop deep expertise in specific eras, regions, or types of distributions, rather than pursuing impossible comprehensiveness. These specialized subcommunities can maintain richer knowledge and stronger social bonds than generic collecting scenes. The phenomenon of shiny lock itself deserves deeper examination, as it represents Game Freak's most direct intervention in controlling which Pokémon can appear in alternate colorations. Shiny locking prevents specific encounters from ever appearing as shinies, regardless of how many times they're reset. This mechanic was introduced relatively late in the franchise's history, becoming common in Generation 5, and essentially universal for special encounters in later generations. The decision to implement shiny locking reflects Game Freak's evolving philosophy about how mythical and legendary Pokémon should be distributed. Understanding why specific Pokémon are shiny locked while others aren't reveals an interesting priorities in game design. Story-important encounters, like the box legendary you're meant to catch as part of the main narrative, are often shiny locked to prevent players from spending weeks hunting when the game expects them to catch the Pokémon and move forward. This design choice prioritizes narrative flow over hunting opportunities, accepting that some players will be disappointed, but ensuring the majority can experience the story without extended delays. Mythical Pokémon, distributed through events, are almost universally shiny locked in modern generations, except when Game Freak specifically intends to distribute shiny variants. This creates a controlled approach where shiny mythicals only exist when Game Freak actively chooses to make them available, preventing players from hunting variants that Game Freak wants to remain rare. This level of control wouldn't be possible if all mythical encounters were soft resettable as determined hunters could eventually obtain shiny variants regardless of Game Freak's distribution plans. The community's response to shiny locking has been mixed. Some appreciate that it makes officially distributed shiny mythicals more special, as their existence proves Game Freak specifically chose to create them. Others feel frustrated that hunting opportunities are removed, preferring systems where dedication can overcome any obstacle. These different perspectives reflect fundamental disagreements about whether controlled scarcity or hunting accessibility better serves the collecting community's interests. Certain Pokémon have complex shiny lock situations that create confusion about whether they're legitimately obtainable in shiny form. Keldeo, for instance, was shiny locked in its original black and white distribution and remained unobtainable as a shiny through any legitimate means for years. Eventually, a shiny Keldeo distribution occurred during a limited event, making shiny Keldeo exist, but only for players who participated in that specific distribution. This pattern, where Pokémon remain shiny locked until specific events temporarily make shiny variants available, has become increasingly common. Victini follows a similar trajectory, remaining shiny locked in its original Generation 5 distribution and through most subsequent appearances. The eventual release of shiny Victini through a limited Pokémon Sword and Shield distribution created one of the franchise's rarer modern shinies, as the distribution window was brief and required specific actions to claim. Collectors who obtained shiny Victini during this window possess a Pokémon that may never be distributed again, creating instant rarity through controlled scarcity. The Ultra Beasts present interesting cases in shiny availability. In their original Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon appearances, most Ultra Beasts could be soft reset and hunted for shiny variants, making them accessible to dedicated hunters despite their otherworldly origins and unique lore. However, certain Ultra Beasts like Poipole were locked to specific distributions, creating a mixed availability landscape, where some of these interdimensional creatures could be hunted while others could only be obtained through events. This inconsistency in which Ultra Beasts are huntable versus event exclusive creates stratification within the Ultra Beast collecting community. Shiny Nihiligo, Buzzwole, Pheromosa, and others can be hunted in their original games at standard odds, making them rare but accessible to anyone willing to invest the time. Shiny Poipole and its evolution, Naganadel, remain event exclusive, creating a divide between Ultra Beast shinies anyone can theoretically obtain and those locked behind historical distributions. Cosmog represents one of the more unusual cases in shiny accessibility. In Pokémon Sun and Moon, Cosmog is gifted to the player as part of the story, and this gift Cosmog is shiny locked. However, through a quirk in the game's mechanics, Cosmog can be bred in later generations despite being classified as a legendary Pokémon. This creates a path to shiny Cosmog through breeding that bypasses the shiny lock on the story encounter, making shiny Cosmog technically obtainable, but only through a method that many players don't realize exists. The resulting shiny Cosmog and its evolutions. Cosmoem and either Solgaleo or Lunala are rare not because they're impossible to obtain, but because few hunters realize they can be pursued through breeding. This creates a form of rarity based on obscure knowledge rather than absolute scarcity, where informed hunters can obtain specimens that casual players assume are unobtainable. In collecting communities, shiny Cosmog line Pokémon carry moderate value, recognized as requiring effort and knowledge, but not approaching the extreme rarity of true event exclusives. Type Null and Silvally present similar situations, being legendary classified Pokémon that are nonetheless breedable through technically complex methods. In their origin games, these Pokémon are gifted as part of the story and are shiny locked. However, they can be bred to produce offspring, and those offspring can be shiny. The breeding process requires specific setups and understanding of breeding mechanics, creating a knowledge barrier that keeps shiny-type Null and Silvally relatively rare, despite being theoretically accessible. The distinction between truly impossible shinies and merely difficult or obscure ones creates important stratification in how collectors value different rare specimens. A shiny that's genuinely impossible to obtain legitimately, except through past distributions, carries different prestige than one that's simply difficult to hunt or requires obscure knowledge. Both might be rare in practical terms, but the impossible shiny's permanent inaccessibility creates a form of value that difficult hunts can't replicate. Regional variant Pokémon add another layer to shiny collecting, as each regional form has its own shiny coloration distinct from both the standard form and another region's variants. Alolan and Galarian forms of previously existing Pokémon created new hunting targets for collectors who already owned shiny versions of the original forms. This multiplication of potential shinies per species creates expanded collecting goals while also making comprehensive completion even more challenging. Some regional variants have more visually striking shiny forms than their original counterparts, creating situations where the regional form's shiny is more sought after despite being functionally the same species. Alolan Vulpix and Ninetales, for instance, have beautiful icy white shiny forms that many collectors prefer to the original Cantonian form's golden shinies. These aesthetic preferences drive hunting priorities and create varied demand within the collecting community. The introduction of Gigantamax forms in Pokémon Sword and Shield created yet another dimension of rarity, as certain Pokémon have special Gigantamax-capable forms with different appearances when Dynamaxed. While Gigantamax capability isn't visible as a permanent alternate coloration like shinies, combining it with shiny forms creates rare variants that are both visually distinct and mechanically unique. Shiny Gigantamax Pokémon from a limited max raid. Battle events represent modern rare specimens that blend event exclusivity with visual appeal. Some Gigantamax distributions were shiny locked, while others could appear as shinies with extremely low probability. The Gigantamax Meowth, distributed as a mystery gift reward for early Sword and Shield adopters, was shiny locked, ensuring every player received an identical specimen. Meanwhile, Gigantamax Pokémon appearing in promoted max raid battles could be shiny, but had probability so low that finding one required extraordinary luck or extensive hunting. This mixed approach created different tiers of Gigantamax rarity. The mechanics of max raid battle shiny hunting introduced new strategies and community collaboration. Because raids could be shared online, hunters who found shiny raid Pokémon could invite others to join, spreading access to that specific shiny encounter across multiple players. This created temporary windows where shiny raid Pokémon became more accessible than normal, but only to players who were online at the right moment and successfully joined the raid. The social coordination required added community dimensions to hunting that hadn't existed in previous generations. Dynamax Adventures in the Crown Tundra expansion introduced another unique hunting method where players navigate through series of battles, encountering legendary Pokémon at the end with boosted shiny odds. This method made many legendary shinies more accessible than ever before, as the 1 in 300 odds, combined with the ability to check multiple Pokémon per run, created relatively efficient hunting. Collectors who had spent years pursuing full odds legendary shinies had mixed reactions to this increased accessibility, appreciating the opportunity while also feeling that it devalued their earlier achievements. The question of whether increased accessibility devalues existing rare shinies creates ongoing debate. Hunters who succeeded at full odds before improved methods were introduced. sometimes feel their achievements are diminished when the same Pokémon becomes easier to obtain. Others argue that expanding access benefits the community by allowing more players to participate in collecting without demanding hundreds of hours per shiny. This tension between preserving the significance of difficult achievements and expanding accessibility shapes how collectors respond to new hunting methods. Game Freak's gradual introduction of shiny odds improvements across generations reflects evolving philosophy about accessibility. The shiny charm in later generations permanently boosts odds for players who complete their Pokédexes, rewarding comprehensive play with improved hunting efficiency. Chain methods allow dedicated hunters to stack odds higher through sustained effort. These improvements acknowledge that shiny hunting has become a core part of how many players engage with Pokémon while maintaining enough challenge that success still feels meaningful. The Masuda method, named after director Junichi Masuda, revolutionized breeding-based hunting by significantly boosting odds when breeding Pokémon from different language games. This method created international collaboration opportunities, as players trading breeding stock across language boundaries helped each other access improved odds. The community developed breeding trading networks specifically to facilitate Masuda method hunting, creating social structures around a mechanical optimization strategy. Chain fishing in Generation 6 introduced one of the most accessible shiny hunting methods, allowing players to encounter successive fishing encounters that built up chain bonuses, improving shiny odds. The method's simplicity made it popular with newer hunters, while its effectiveness created the opportunities to hunt specific water-type shinies relatively efficiently. Chain fishing became a gateway hunting method that introduced many players to shiny hunting before they graduated to more complex methods. Friend Safari in X and Y created another unique hunting environment where visiting other players' safaris provided access to specific Pokémon with improved shiny odds. This method required social connection, as expanding your safari options depended on having friends who owned the game and had registered you on their systems. The social requirement added community dimensions, while the improved odds made Friend Safari a popular hunting location for specific species. Horde encounters and SOS battles in later generations provided methods for checking multiple Pokémon simultaneously or building chains that improved odds. These methods required different strategies than traditional soft resetting, focusing on encounter management and chain maintenance rather than simple repeated resets. Hunters developed specialized strategies for different methods, creating knowledge depth within the hunting community around optimizing various approaches. The Poké-Radar method across multiple generations created one of the more mechanically complex hunting systems, requiring precise movement patterns and chain management to maintain boosted odds. Mastering Poké-Radar hunting demanded an understanding probability mechanics, optimal movement strategies, and how to recover from chain breaks. The method's complexity created a skilled hunting sub-community proud of their technical expertise, while its effectiveness when executed properly made it worthwhile for hunters willing to learn its intricacies. Dex Nav hunting in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire introduced environmental sneaking mechanics to shiny hunting, creating a more active hunting experience than traditional resetting. Hunters needed to approach Pokémon carefully without startling them, adding gameplay skill to the normally luck-based activity. The method's engagement made it popular among hunters who found traditional soft resetting too passive, providing a more interactive alternative with its own learning curve. The evolution of hunting methods across generations demonstrates Game Freak's ongoing experimentation with how to make shiny hunting engaging. Rather than settling on a single approach, Each generation introduces new methods with different mechanical requirements and skill expressions. This variety allows hunters with different preferences to find methods they enjoy, whether they prefer the meditative rhythm of soft resetting, the strategic planning of chain methods, or the active gameplay of sneaking approaches. Different hunters develop preferences for specific methods based on their playstyles and what they find satisfying. Some prefer soft resetting for its simplicity and directness, appreciating that success depends purely on probability without requiring mechanical execution. Others enjoy chain methods' gameplay elements, valuing the skill expression and feeling of control over odds. Still others favor breeding for its progression system, where each egg represents measurable progress toward a goal. The community's collective knowledge about hunting methods represents decades of experimentation and optimization. Detailed guides explain every method's mechanics, optimal strategies, and common mistakes to avoid. Video tutorials demonstrate proper execution. Probability calculators help hunters understand their chances and expected completion times. This knowledge infrastructure makes modern hunting more accessible than early generations, when hunters developed strategies through trial and error without community resources. The relationship between hunting efficiency and satisfaction creates interesting dynamics. Some hunters optimize every aspect of their approaches, using the fastest methods and most effective strategies to minimize time invested. Others intentionally choose slower methods or full odds hunts because the increased challenge makes success feel more meaningful. These different approaches reflect varied motivations for hunting, from collecting specimens efficiently to pursuing personal challenges that test patience and dedication. Shiny hunting challenges and self-imposed restrictions create additional complexity for experienced hunters seeking new goals. Some hunt specific teams using only certain methods, complete type-focused collections, or pursue every shiny in specific Pokédexes. These self-designed challenges provide structure and direction beyond simply accumulating rare shinies, creating personal narratives and milestones that make hunting feel purposeful rather than aimless. Badge quest challenges, where hunters complete each game, catching only shinies and using them for all battles, represent extreme commitment to hunting. These challenges can take hundreds of hours, as hunters must find shiny team members while progressing through the game's story. Success requires both hunting skill and strategic planning to ensure the shinies obtained can handle required battles. Completing badge quests earns significant respect within hunting communities as demonstrations of extraordinary dedication. Living shiny dex completion, owning every Pokémon in shiny form simultaneously, represents the ultimate collecting challenge. With over 1,000 species across multiple forms, completing a living shiny dex requires years of sustained hunting across multiple games. The handful of hunters who have achieved this demonstrate patience and commitment that few others can match. These comprehensive collections become legendary within the community, representing the peak of what dedicated hunting can achieve. The psychological aspects of long-term hunting projects deserve examination. Pursuing a goal that might take months or years requires maintaining motivation through extended periods without success. Hunters develop various strategies for sustaining engagement, including setting smaller milestone goals, hunting multiple targets simultaneously to vary activity, or taking breaks to prevent burnout. Understanding the psychological demands of extended hunts helps hunters approach their goals sustainably. The role of community support in maintaining motivation cannot be overstated. Hunting discords and forums provide spaces where hunters encourage each other, celebrate successes, and commiserate over extended dry spells. Knowing others are pursuing similar challenges and experiencing similar frustrations helps individual hunters persist through difficulties. This social support structure transforms hunting from isolated activity into shared experience, making the journey as valuable as the destination. Streaming shiny hunts creates additional accountability and community connection. Streamers hunting live for audiences create shared experiences where viewers participate vicariously in the hunt. When the shiny finally appears, the collective celebration creates memorable moments that bond streamers with their communities. This public dimension transforms hunting from private pursuit into a community event, adding social pressure to continue difficult hunts while also providing support and encouragement. The economics of streaming shiny content creates interesting dynamics. Popular shiny hunting streams can generate income through subscriptions and donations, potentially justifying the extensive time investment required for difficult hunts. This professionalization of hunting creates a class of dedicated hunters who pursue rare shinies not just for personal collection, but as content for their audiences. The resulting hunts are often more extreme and challenging than typical collecting, as content creation demands push hunters toward increasingly difficult targets. The future of shiny hunting will likely continue evolving as new generations introduce fresh mechanics and methods. Game Freak has shown consistent willingness to experiment with how hunting works, suggesting future games will offer new approaches rather than simply maintaining existing systems. Whether these innovations make hunting more or less accessible, more or less skill-based, or more or less social will significantly impact how collecting communities evolve. Potential technological advances could transform hunting in unexpected ways. If future Pokémon games implement features like cross-platform play, cloud-based trading, or augmented reality encounters, the landscape of rare, shiny collecting might shift dramatically. These technologies could make certain types of hunts easier while introducing new challenges or restrictions that create fresh forms of rarity. How collectors adapt to technological change will shape the hobby's evolution. The balance between nostalgia for traditional methods and enthusiasm for innovation creates productive tension within both hunting communities. Veteran hunters who learned on older methods sometimes resist changes that make hunting easier or fundamentally different from their formative experiences. Newer hunters embrace the innovations that remove friction and make hunting more accessible. These different perspectives coexist within communities, creating dialogue about what hunting should be and who it should serve. Preservation of hunting knowledge across generations ensures that even as new methods emerge, understanding of traditional approaches isn't lost. Documentation of how hunting worked in earlier generations helps collectors that appreciate the historical context of rare specimens obtained through outdated methods. This historical awareness enriches collecting by providing perspective on how rarity has been created across the franchise's evolution. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed drifting through these quiet stories of impossible creatures and forgotten events, there's another video waiting on the left of your screen. Let it play softly beside you. You may drift into sleep while something new unfolds, another journey through the gentle mysteries that make Pokémon feel timeless and alive.